This is the Everyday AI Show, the everyday podcast where we simplify AI and bring its power to your fingertips. Listen daily for practical advice to boost your career, business, and everyday life.
Meet Firefly AI Assistant, now live in Adobe Firefly, the all-in-one creative AI studio. Just describe what you want to create, and the assistant handles the rest, orchestrating multi-step workflows across Photoshop, Premiere, Express, and more in one conversational interface. You direct the outcome, the assistant accelerates execution. The AI tools that we use every single day have completely changed, and hardly anyone noticed. That's the importance of keeping up with AI news, but let me lay all of this out. 900 million people each week are likely using a new model inside of ChatGPT and probably don't know. Claude could become more reliable for once, and it took a very unlikely third party to make that happen. And a new AI study had some pretty shocking findings about how bad most companies are at deploying AI in the workforce. Oh, and the federal government might soon have its fingerprint on every single new AI model that comes out, in a kind of 180-degree flip on its previous stance. If you missed any of those AI news stories, don't worry. We're going to be recapping those and a whole lot more today on Everyday AI. What's going on, y'all? Welcome to Everyday AI. My name is Jordan Wilson, and this thing's for you. It's your daily, unedited live stream podcast and free daily newsletter helping everyday business leaders like you and me not just keep up with all these AI developments, but what they actually mean and how to use this information to grow your company and your career. So if that's what you're trying to do, me too. It starts here, but make sure you go to youreverydayai.com. Sign up for our free daily newsletter, and we're going to be recapping all of these stories and a whole lot more. So without further ado, let's get into it. Who is that third party that might be helping Anthropic keep up with the demands that they just can't quite serve? Well, it is OpenAI's chief rival now, Elon Musk, in their company xAI. So here's what's new and why you need to know. So Elon Musk has leased SpaceX's largest and most valuable supercomputer to Anthropic, despite previously calling the company evil and accusing it of hating Western civilization, making this a pretty sharp and newsworthy reversal. So the deal centers on xAI's Colossus 1, a massive data center in Memphis containing about 220,000 NVIDIA GPUs, and analysts estimate it will generate $3 to $4 billion in annual revenue for SpaceX, with more than $2.5 billion in cash profit. So the agreement between xAI, which is now under the SpaceX, might be now called SpaceX AI. Elon keeps changing the names, but the agreement comes just weeks before SpaceX is expected to begin its IPO roadshow after filing a confidential S-1 in April, targeting a valuation between $1.5 and $2 trillion, according to analysts. So the timing also matters for Anthropic. That's because the Anthropic lease does give SpaceX a marquee AI customer, and hopefully what Anthropic is hoping that their service will become more reliable before they start to get closer to their plans to go public. Colossus 1 was originally built in 2024 to train Musk's AI assistant Grok, but Grok generates right now under $1 billion in annualized revenue, while Anthropic is on track to exceed maybe closer to $30 billion, according to some reports, creating excess compute that SpaceX was motivated to monetize. So by leasing directly to Anthropic, SpaceX captures the high margins that AI labs usually pay to the hyperscalers like AWS, Microsoft Azure, or Google Cloud, whose compute margins exceed 30%, according to most analysts. So here's the interesting part, right? Anthropic, their uptime is pretty bad, right? So across most industries, you aim for 3 nines or 4 nines, right? So 99.9% uptime, 99.99% uptime, right? That's kind of your gold standard for most enterprise software. So as a lot of enterprises now are looking at Anthropic's Claude to say, okay, could this be our AI chatbot of choice? Yeah, their uptime on some of these different services is in the 98s. So not even close to where it should be for any reliable service, let alone something that's as critical as an AI operating system, essentially. So obviously, Anthropic and OpenAI have kind of been, racing, especially in 2026. I think now they're kind of seen as rivals, whereas before maybe they weren't seen as much as rivals, aside from people in the AI space every single day, like myself. But for the most part, it really intensified in 2026. They started exchanging all these jabs. But one thing that Anthropic cannot compete on, at least right now, is uptime. OpenAI is extremely reliable and Anthropic is not. So it is pretty interesting here that Elon Musk did call Anthropic evil not too long ago. And now he's essentially giving them not all the compute they need, but a lot of the compute that they need to, actually challenge OpenAI. And obviously, Elon Musk has been suing OpenAI. So it's almost like, Elon calls Anthropic evil. He clearly doesn't like OpenAI. So he's, teaming up with a company he called evil to go against a company that he probably likes even less. So pretty interesting here in terms of, unlikely duos that most people probably weren't expecting. All right. Our next piece of AI news, Cloudflare cutting 20% of its global workforce, which is about 1,100 jobs, marking the company's first mass layoff and its largest job reduction to date. So the layoffs were announced alongside Cloudflare's earnings report, making that move newsworthy because it signals a major strategic shift rather than a short-term response to financial trouble. So obviously, company executives say the cuts are part of an AI-first restructuring aimed at redesigning how work gets done as automation and so-called agentic AI tools take on more across the business. So Cloudflare emphasized that the job reductions are not primarily about cost-cutting or fixing performance problems, but instead are about reorganizing teams to move faster with AI-driven operations. Investors, though, this one's interesting, reacted sharply, with Cloudflare shares falling more than 20% after the company issued second quarter revenue guidance that came in slightly below Wall Street expectations. So that one is interesting because normally when big companies, especially AI companies that are public, come out with news that they're cutting jobs because of AI, generally their stock goes up. But this one is primarily, with their stock going down, I think happens because the company said that their second quarter revenue came in slightly below expectations. So my thought is if Cloudflare's revenue came in above expectations and they cutted 20% of their workforce because of AI, their stock would have shot up because that does seem like the kind of the blueprint that most companies have been following. So, according to Cloudflare, the restructuring will affect roles across regions and departments, highlighting how AI adoption is beginning to reshape white-collar tech jobs, not just manufacturing or support work. So, if you don't know Cloudflare, they kind of run the entire internet, which is why this one is probably important to anyone. Even if you've never heard of Cloudflare, there's a good chance that your website, your company's business runs on Cloudflare in some shape or form. Maybe if your company's website even isn't even hosted or routed through Cloudflare's services, there's a good chance that a crucial piece of software that you use on the day-to-day basis runs through Cloudflare. So it does have its thumbprint on literally the entire internet and how everything operates, AI companies and non-AI companies as well. So it will be worth noting to see how this rolls out because this is the first kind of big AI company that announced AI job cuts and their stock went down. So could this be a new trend moving forward? Might this keep companies from announcing these large AI job cuts, especially public companies, when they see that Cloudflare's stock actually went down after this announcement? I would say probably not. My thought is this is actually just going to be a key signal moving forward that when big companies announce they're cutting thousands of jobs because of AI, they have to do it more strategically around their earnings. And I do think that will actually be the big takeaway from this, because most other companies, when they announce, these big AI job cuts, their stock is usually already going up, or their earnings are, meeting or exceeding expectations. And that's usually when they couple in these, AI job cuts. So, who knows? Maybe Cloudflare wasn't able to sustain this much longer, but in their, announcement, they essentially said, hey, AI can do the job way faster now. So we don't need all of these, roles that we had previously have. But the messaging, the timing, especially for public companies, I think Cloudflare is going to serve as one of those small use cases for other companies, because I've been saying this since 2023. This is the playbook, right? For the most part, Cloudflare is one of the few exceptions here. But you announce big AI job cuts, you show that revenue's going up, and well, your stock will go up accordingly. Because one thing Wall Street loves, Wall Street loves efficiency. They hate employees, and they love profit going up. So usually you can pair those three things together in these announcements. Cloudflare, the exception here. So, all right, let's keep moving. Our next piece of AI news. Apple has reached a settlement for promising AI that it couldn't deliver as part of its Apple Intelligence. So Apple has agreed to a $250 million class action lawsuit settlement after being accused of misleading customers about the capabilities of their Apple Intelligence. So the settlement matters because it centers on how major tech companies market their internal artificial intelligence at a time when AI claims are shaping consumer buying decisions and regulatory scrutiny is now increasing. So the lawsuit claimed that Apple overstated AI features such as advanced writing tools and a more conversational Siri, which were heavily promoted before and after the iPhone 16 launch in September 2024, but were not fully delivered. Yeah, so if you go back to Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference, WWDC 2024, everything was about, Apple Intelligence. And I scoffed at it, obviously, the fact that Apple was bold enough to try to rebrand artificial intelligence as Apple Intelligence. But I mean, I knew, and I think most people knew, that Apple was so far behind and that all of these promises were not likely to come to fruition, right? Go back, listen to some of the shows around that time. I obviously called it out at the time. And, I think Apple has probably ended up costing itself multiple trillions of dollars in market cap over the long run by not properly investing and prioritizing in AI over the past couple of years. We'll see. I think maybe their future angle could actually work out best, where they're just kind of admitting that they can't do it. And then they're paying, competitors like Google to just use their AI instead. But here's how this lawsuit is going to play out, this class action settlement. So U.S. customers who bought specific iPhone 15 and iPhone 16 models between June 2024 and March 2025 may qualify for payments ranging from $25 to $95 once a judge approves the amounts. So eligible devices listed in the agreement include the iPhone 15 Pro, the iPhone 15 Pro Max, and the full iPhone 16 lineup, including the Pro and Pro Max models. As part of this settlement, though, Apple did not admit wrongdoing and said in a statement to the New York Times that it settled the case to stay focused on building products and services for users. So the case combines several class action lawsuits and that argued Apple violated consumer protection laws by promoting enhanced Siri features and AI tools that were not ready or remain unavailable today. So Apple's delayed AI-powered Siri has been a major industry talking point, with the updated version now expected to fully roll out sometime around WWDC 2026, roughly 2 years later than early marketing suggested. So Yeah, I mean, we'll see what Apple does with AI now that Tim Cook is out of the kind of day-to-day CEO role and focused now as chairman. But this, at least to me, comes as no surprise, right? Apple having to settle a class action lawsuit because they overpromised on some basic AI features that they couldn't deliver, right? And I do think ultimately this will be maybe studied, in business school, 10 to 20 years, or, maybe by our AI tutors in 10 to 20 years about how not to market features, right? Especially when you just you don't have it, right? Apple didn't have really anything, and they were promoting all of these features that clearly did not work or they could not deliver on, which is interesting because Apple had the capabilities back. If you go back to 2019, 2020, right, when the industry, for the most part, knew that this is where things were headed, right? It wasn't the ChatGPT moment of November 2022 that signaled where the future of technology was headed. I think that most companies, especially bigger companies, knew right after the kind of introduction or the realization of the transformer from the attention is all you need paper. I think most companies understood that the future was going to be around AI, right? And obviously, Apple had the talent, right? They had great machine learning teams already up to that point. I don't know if they were too slow, if they were too proud. One kind of common story that we saw over the years was Apple just refusing to pay talent, right? It got to the point, I would say, especially in 2022, 2023, 2024, where you had these bidding wars, right? All of a sudden, the smartest AI leaders, the smartest machine learning engineers were starting to demand $1 million salaries. And it seemed like Apple was just like, no, we're not going to play, right? All the stories, Meta, nabbing Apple researchers, OpenAI nabbing Apple researchers, Google, everyone pulling the smartest AI people away from Apple, but you didn't see any stories about people going to Apple. And a lot of the reasoning and the rationale behind it was, well, Apple just wasn't going to play the game. They weren't going to pay anyone $1 million salary, a $5 million salary, right? Some of these companies paid these people tens of millions of dollars over a multiple year contract. And Apple kind of from the outside was like, no, we're Apple. We don't do that. Or, we're not going to invest in AI. People, companies are still going to use, Apple products regardless. So again, we'll see with new leadership in play what happens here. Obviously, the surge of local AI models has probably helped Apple a lot, sell a lot more, Mac minis and, Mac Studios, a lot of people flocking to buy those to run open models like, OpenClaw, and just to run models on their local machines. So maybe Apple has been a kind of side beneficiary of the local model surge. But when it comes to actually delivering the capabilities that consumers both want and business users, Apple failed to follow through on their promises, and now they're having to dish out $250 million. But if I'm being honest, I'm one of those users that's going to get, $90 or whatever, because, my whole family, we bought iPhones around that time. It wasn't just because of Apple Intelligence. It was more of like, okay, need new iPhones. And we've been on iPhones for, 10 years. So if I'm being honest, I think Apple got off lightly here with only a $250 million settlement, considering how heavy they promoted, right? They literally had commercials showing Apple Intelligence features that did not exist, and they actually aired those commercials, right? And they weren't even close to existing. So I actually think Apple kind of got off light here. All right, our next AI news story, kind of a big one, but technically a small release that's going to impact I don't know, almost 1 billion people. That's because OpenAI has released a new model called GPT-5.5 Instant, which replaced GPT-5.3 Instant as the default ChatGPT model, marking a major update focused on accuracy, speed, and real-world usefulness. So the company says GPT 5.5 Instant reduces hallucinations in sensitive fields like law, medicine, and finance, while keeping the low response times that made the previous Instant model popular. So GPT 5.5 scored 81.2 on the AIM 2025 math test a sharp improvement over GPT-3 instance score of 65.4, signaling stronger performance in advanced problem-solving tasks. So a key focus of the new release is context management. And this one kind of flew under the radar, if I'm being honest, as GPT 5.5 Instant now can use search tools to reference past chats, files, and even Gmail to deliver more personalized responses. So, this personalized context feature is rolling out first to Plus and Pro users on the web, with mobile support coming soon and broader access planned for free, Go, business, and enterprise users in the coming weeks. ChatGPT will now show memory sources across all models, allowing users to see where answers came from, delete outdated information, or correct mistakes, while keeping those sources hidden when chats are shared. So if you're on the developer side, GPT 5.5 will be available via the chat latest naming, with GPT 5.3 remaining available for paid users for only 3 more months. I mean, here's why this is a big deal, aside from, well, it's just a better, more powerful, more capable model. Kind of the naming a little confusing here, right? Because even before GPT 5.5 came out, for paid users, they had GPT 5.4, which was a very capable model, right? I loved 5.4, and I think a lot of power users really loved it, because I think with 5.4, especially 5.4 Pro, that's kind of the time when OpenAI's most powerful model, and it still holds true across benchmarks today with 5.5 Pro. That Pro model can't be touched, at least not by Google, not by Anthropic. No one is getting close to the Pro tier, right? But there was, I think, a pretty big gap, because even when you had GPT 5.4, the default model, the default chat model for users that didn't change anything, was still 5.3 Instant. So when we had 5.5, the default instant model that most people were using was GPT 5.3 Instant. So it was technically like 2 small generational steps behind, right? So this is why it's actually a pretty big deal. Not just because this is the default model that nearly 1 billion people are using, and it's that much better, but all of these new memory features that are rolling out as well, that I think are actually going to make a pretty big deal. All right, we have more, but before we get into it, a quick break for a word from our partners. Adobe just introduced an entirely new way to create, bringing the power and precision of its creative suite into one conversational experience. Meet Firefly AI Assistant, now live in the Adobe Firefly app, the all-in-one creative AI studio. Powered by Adobe's Creative Agent, Firefly AI Assistant lets you start with your vision, just describe what you want, and shape the outcome as it takes form with the assistant. The assistant orchestrates multi-step workflows, drawing on 60-plus pro-grade tools across Adobe Creative Cloud apps, including Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere, Lightroom, Express, and more, to help bring your ideas to life. You can also get started with Creative Skills, a growing library of pre-built workflows for common creative tasks like batch editing photos, creating mood boards, portrait retouching, and creating social variations. Every step the assistant takes is visible, so you can refine, redirect, or take over at any time. You stay in the driver's seat as the creative director. Adobe Firefly AI Assistant, now in public beta. See it today at firefly.adobe.com. All right, our next AI news story, one of my favorite AI studies that I don't think gets enough shine and coverage. So I'm going to talk about it today. So a new study from Microsoft's 2026 Work Trend Index finds a growing gap between how fast employees are adopting AI and how slowly most organizations are changing to support it. So according to Microsoft's new study, and this is the Work Trend Index annual report, they surveyed 20,000 AI using knowledge workers across 10 countries. And one of their biggest findings was only that 19% are in what they call the frontier group, where strong individual AI skills and strong organizational support reinforce each other. right? So that's kind of the gold standard when you have AI, kind of AI native employees and you have strong organizational structure around them. But the remaining workforce, this study found, is spread across weaker positions, including 50% in the emergent middle, 10% in the blocked agency, where skilled AI users are actually held back by their companies, and 16% who are stalled, and 5% where companies are ready, but employees are actually not. So Microsoft calls this the transformation paradox, meaning employees are ready to change how work gets done, but company systems like incentives, metrics, and management practices keep reinforcing old ways of working. Organizational factors matter far more than individual talent, the study found, with culture, manager support, and talent practices accounting for 67% of reported AI impact, compared with 32% from individual mindset and behavior. So, yeah, even when you have employees that have the right mindset and behavior, which is a pretty big gap, it doesn't really matter too much because you do need the culture, the manager support, and the talent practices to support those individual leaders. Leadership alignment is also a major weakness reported, as only 26% of AI users say their leadership is clearly aligned on AI, and leaders are twice as likely as employees to believe that reinvention is rewarded, revealing a large perception gap. Microsoft found that the advanced frontier professionals, who make up about 16% of AI users, are far more productive, more deliberate about when to use AI, and far more likely to work for managers who actively model AI use and set quality standards. So, yeah, I think the big takeaway here is that 16%, right? Or no, I'm sorry, 19% in the frontier group. And that's when you have essentially individual employees who are bought in. They have been able to take advantage of the latest that AI has to offer, and then companies that provide the proper support. So the fact that you only have 19% of that, I in the year 2026, the middle of 2026, is pretty telling. It is telling how AI, I think, is no longer a capabilities problem in terms of individuals understanding the capabilities of AI, because you still have the individuals who are ahead, but it's more of just getting the company aligned and on board, right? These companies that are slow moving ships and just wrapped in multiple layers of bureaucracy, they're not ultimately going to come out of this AI transformation on the right side. It is going to be those, whether they're large enterprises or smaller businesses, that from the organizational level understand this big shift of AI. It's not like anything that we've really ever seen. And you can't apply the same, 1 year pilot, the same quarterly roadmaps that you applied to the cloud or mobile. So great study from Microsoft. If you missed it in our newsletter last week, we will link it again this week. All right. Our next AI news story: the Trump White House may have their fingerprints on all future powerful AI models that come out of the US. So the White House is moving toward a federal AI model vetting process. So this is pretty big because the US government is moving closer to a formal oversight of those powerful AI systems, with federal agencies now positioning themselves to test advanced models before they reach the public. So here is the new group that you should probably pay attention to. It's a mouthful. So it is the Center for AI Standards and Innovation, or the CAISI. I'm wondering if we should just call them Cassie. I don't know. But that's part of the U.S. Department of Commerce's National Institute of Standards and Technology. So they've signed new agreements with Google DeepMind, Microsoft, and Elon Musk's xAI to evaluate their AI models before and after deployment. So, according to the CAISI, the agency will conduct pre-deployment testing and targeted research to assess frontier AI capabilities, focusing on security risk, autonomous behavior, and potential real-world misuse. So these agreements expand a program first launched under the Biden administration when CAISI, then called just the U.S. Artificial Intelligence Safety Institute, signed major deals with Anthropic and OpenAI nearly 2 years ago. So obviously, we've heard what's happening with Anthropic in the Department of Defense, but they did already have those pre-existing agreements with Anthropic and OpenAI. So the new deals with Microsoft, Google DeepMind, and XAI are added to those companies that already had the pre-existing deals. So Microsoft said in a blog post that government-led testing is essential to building trust in advanced AI, arguing that as AI systems become more capable, the rigor of safeguards and testing must increase as well. So the announcement comes just ahead of a Bloomberg report that the White House is preparing an executive order to create a centralized federal vetting system for new AI models, including Anthropic's recently unveiled Mythos system, right, that they've been really hyping up but have not yet released to the public. So Bloomberg also reported that Anthropic disclosed Mythos was highly effective at identifying network vulnerabilities, raising concerns inside the administration about potential global cybersecurity risks if such systems are misused. All right. Our last big story of the week, OpenAI and Anthropic are getting into the AI services firms, right? So according to reports, OpenAI and Anthropic are in talks to both acquire and build engineering and consulting companies that help businesses deploy AI, signaling a pretty big shift in the AI race from just these companies building the models themselves. So OpenAI's new joint venture is called the Deployment Company, or Deploy Co. And they are right now in advanced talks on 3 major acquisitions, and they're raising about $4 billion from 19 big institutional investors, including TPG, Bain Capital, and Brookfield Asset Management, according to sources. So yeah, they're raising a ton of money from some of the biggest backers in the game. Anthropic is reportedly making a similar move, raising about $1.5 billion from investors, including Blackstone, Hellman and Freeman, and Goldman Sachs, as it builds its own deployment-focused ventures. So the goal of both of these companies is to bring in hundreds of engineers and consultants who can customize AI models for specific company data, systems, and workflows, which remains a major hurdle to widespread enterprise AI adoption. So this marks a new competitive front for AI companies, as success increasingly depends not just on how powerful your models are and how good your AI features are, but more on the labor-intensive work required to actually integrate them into everyday business operations. So reports show that most of the capital raised by the two companies will likely be used to buy smaller engineering services and consulting firms, potentially consolidating a fragmented market. So this strategy mirrors Palantir's long-standing approach of embedding their engineers inside client organizations to adopt software on the ground, a model now being adopted more widely across the AI industry. To me, this is no surprise. Why? Well, because I've been saying, since like 2024, that the big consulting groups were too slow, right? A lot of when the ChatGPT moment first happened, you had some of the bigger consulting firms kind of poo-pooing on AI. They're like, nope, we're not going to use it. We are, essentially smarter. We don't need AI, right? We have all of our own systems. And then eventually, for the most part, by 2024, most of the big consulting firms kind of did their about face, and they're like, oh, wait, yeah, we need to use AI at every single turn. And at the time, I said consulting companies, for the most part, especially the mid-tier ones, are going to have to go out of business. The big ones are going to be able to survive. They're going to realize, whether it's 1 or 3 years too late, that they need to become absolutely AI native and infuse AI in every part of their workflow, and probably even change their pricing structure to the traditional, build hourly rate to some sort of outcomes-based pricing. But regardless of that, it is, I won't say shocking, but it's telling here that OpenAI and Anthropic are basically saying, nope, we're coming in with our own firms, even though they have big partnerships with the kind of the big fours of the world. It's pretty telling here when OpenAI and Anthropic are coming in, because one of the things that they're seeing is, well, companies need more help implementing these AI models, because as capabilities race so quickly ahead, right? This is one of the biggest, the capabilities problem is one of the biggest problems that we've seen probably in generations, right? Because how companies are actually using AI models and the models capabilities themselves are not aligned, right? For the most part, even larger enterprises are maybe only using 10 to 20% of the AI model capabilities, and they just can't keep up or sometimes even understand everything that they have to offer. All right, that's it for our big AI news stories, but let's quickly go over our bullet point roundup at the end of what's new and what's next. Some of these are rumors, some of these are smaller news stories, but they didn't make the big AI news story cut. But in any other week, they could be the biggest story. So pay attention. We're going to go through them quick. Here we go. So OpenAI released 3 real-time voice models enabling natural conversation translation and instant transcription. This one, y'all, is big because OpenAI did say that they're going to be rolling these out to ChatGPT and maybe even to Codex as well. Could even be as soon as this week. So yeah, finally, the voice modes that we all use might actually be really good pretty soon. Google rolled out Gemini 3.1 Flashlight, its fastest and most cost-efficient Gemini model yet. Anthropic released Claude across Excel, Word, PowerPoint, and Outlook in beta soon. So they rolled everything else out in general availability. So next, Google DeepMind London staff voted to unionize opposing military and surveillance AI use. This happened after the Google DeepMind kind of partnership with the federal government that we just talked about. Spotify rolled out support for saving and playing AI-generated personal podcasts in users' libraries. So yeah, if you've been wanting your OpenClaw to create a daily podcast for you in Spotify, now you have that option. Leaked screenshots show the Codex app from OpenAI control to be rolling out soon. So you may be able to control Codex finally from whether it's the ChatGPT app or a dedicated Codex app. We'll see soon, but it should be rolling out here any day. Week 2 of the Musk OpenAI trial revealed a lot, but they had the Brockman diary, explosive texts, and executive testimony. No real big new news this week, but I'm guessing that'll change this week as week 3 kicks off. XAI is preparing Grok Build, their new cross-platform desktop coding assistant. Speaking of Grok, they released their connectors in their mobile app. Google launched a unified health app and an AI health coach with new Fitbit Air tracker. Anthropic previewed Dreaming for Claude managed agents at their dev conference, adding self-improving memory and orchestration tools. Most of what they announced at their dev day, more on the back end inside of their console, so didn't think it was too important for most of our audience, but we'll see when those things, or if those things, roll out to the front end Claude. Adobe launched AI-powered PDF Spaces, turning Acrobat into an interactive content and collaboration workspace. OpenAI rolled out limited preview of GPT-5.5 Cyber for critical infrastructure cybersecurity defenders. So kind of not their version of Mythos per se, but kind of their version, right? Their next new powerful model, specifically that's really good at cyber. Google AI Studio released edit mode, enabling direct UI component edits and image swapping via Nano Banana. I've been loving that. If you are a builder, make sure you check that one out. Meta is reportedly nearing internal testing of their new always-on agentic AI assistant called Hatch, which is kind of being marketed externally as their OpenClaw competitor. Google is testing Gemini Agent Mode, a new version of it, adding a dedicated tab for advanced automation features. All right, and we have Google's I/O conference here in like less than 2 weeks. So expect a lot of new Google announcements both next week and the week after. OpenAI launched Codex Chrome extension, so good, enabling background browser automation across tabs. We did cover that in our new Friday features show, so just go back one episode where we dove into that. Microsoft released Copilot Cowork on mobile. We covered that in Friday's show as well. And Perplexity rolled out its new Mac app with built-in personal computer support. All right, that is a wrap. Technically, really busy week in AI news, a ton happening, a ton going on. So if you missed any of it, don't worry. That's what our Monday shows are for. But if you really want to stay on the cutting edge, make sure you tune in, well, every day. Maybe this is your first time listening. So if that is you, thank you for listening. Make sure to subscribe to the show on the, whether you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, we appreciate this, but we do it Monday through Friday. So thank you for tuning in. Also, make sure you go to youreverydayai.com, sign up for the free daily newsletter. Thanks for listening today. We hope to see you back tomorrow and every day for more Everyday AI. Thanks, y'all. Meet Firefly AI Assistant, now live in Adobe Firefly, the all-in-one creative AI studio. Just describe what you want to create in your own words, and the assistant handles the rest, orchestrating multi-step workflows across Adobe Creative Cloud apps, including Photoshop, Premiere, Express, and more in one conversational interface. You direct the outcome while the assistant accelerates execution. Stay in control with the ability to step in and refine at any time. See it today at firefly.adobe.com.
And that's a wrap for today's edition of Everyday AI. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a rating. It helps keep us going. For a little more AI magic, visit youreverydayai.com and sign up to our daily newsletter so you don't get left behind. Go break some barriers, and we'll see you next time.